Hey, it's Mike here, and today, are low-fat vegans wrong? In particular, are they missing some health opportunities based off some recent studies that I've been exposed to? I thought, hey, let's explore this. I've eaten low-fat vegan diets in the past, been down at 10% or less calories. It was huge in the past on YouTube as well. So let's just dive into it together and everyone can come to their own conclusions. Let's go. So yeah, the 10% or lower fat sort of vegan diet has a history on YouTube, especially maybe 2012 to 2015, and has support, I would say, scientifically as well. We see the Tarahumara Indians and the Okinawans being down around 10% fat and doing quite well in terms of their disease rates. I've seen doctors like Barnard and Colin Campbell and McDougall say, 10% fat is a good target. And one of the main motivators here is to just keep saturated fat down because saturated fat increases LDL or bad cholesterol. But not all fat is saturated, so we need to examine that as well. And then there's the whole, the fat you eat is the fat you wear idea, where eating a higher percentage of calories from fat is just gonna put you toward being overweight and obese more likely. I see some truth to that, but it's pretty obvious that at a calorie deficit, regardless of macronutrient ratio, you're gonna lose weight and not become obese. And last sort of larger point, I do feel like a lot of people are emotionally invested in eating a really low-fat vegan diet. I'm not trying to ruffle any feathers here. I was just like, oh, here's some data that's changing my perspective on this. And I will even say maybe there's a way that people can sort of hack these benefits while meeting whatever fat targets they're trying to as well. So in one of my more recent videos, I looked over that whole food vegan without oil versus whole food vegan plus quite a bit of olive oil study. And the follow-up to that looked at skin carotenoid status. And the olive oil group was higher. However, I still have some issues with it. Like the weirdly large difference in the baseline values between groups, which accounted for perhaps most of the difference through the study, which just doesn't make any sense. By the way, one device that does this is called a veggie meter. I want one. But that study doesn't really matter. It got me down a path of what is going on potentially with fat intake and carotenoid absorption. And of course, carotenoids, we're talking beta carotene in carrots and sweet potatoes, as well as lycopene in tomatoes and a bunch of other ones. And obviously, they're super healthy. That skin carotenoid status, which makes you look more yellow and blocks UV, can potentially prevent skin cancer. And carotenoids elsewhere in our body, like our eyes, etc., is a really healthy, like the prostate even. And yeah, the issue here is that these carotenoids and some other vitamins, etc., are fat soluble. They create these little micelles in the digestive tract, which they need in order to get absorbed into our body. And the narrative buried deep in my brain from like 2012 YouTube is that even like a gram of fat is gonna let you absorb as much fat soluble stuff as you possibly would need. It's perfect. And I can't find a reference for that, but a close scientific proper claim would be from this study, claiming that a minimum of 3 to 5 grams a day worth of fat guarantees sufficient carotenoid absorption. But sufficient doesn't mean ideal, and as we're gonna see from studies, there's a huge spectrum up and beyond 3 to 5 grams in terms of absorption. And I mentioned a couple studies in that olive oil video, but we're gonna rifle through them really fast in the hopes of not being repetitive. First, we have this canola oil salad study. So they did salad alone, which of course is gonna have very little fat, and then they added canola oil in either 3, 6, or 28 grams, quite a leap, which is about 2 tablespoons. And I do again remember low-fat YouTubers saying that even the fat that is in greens is enough to get the job done. Well, we can look to the chart from that study and know that absolutely is not. It's like basically flatlined. Carotenoid sadness. If I had that much salad and got that few carotenoids, I would be carot-annoyed. I did it, guys. The worst pun of all time. I can finally retire from YouTube. Kidding. But you know me, I'm all about finding a whole food alternative, and we have this avocado study, which was sort of 2 studies in one where they did avocado versus no avocado with a tomato product, which is a lycopene source, as well as avocado versus no avocado with carrot, a beta carotene source. And the charts speak for themselves. We can look to that tomato where we're just seeing a huge difference in absorption, like a disturbingly large amount, a gargantuan difference, which is even dwarfed by the beta carotene absorption from those carrots with avocado. That is absurd and made me reevaluate like my entire life. And I got some questions later, how much avocado was in that study? And it was 23 grams of fat, which comes out to about 3/4 of a larger Hass avocado, or maybe just like a smaller avocado in its entirety. But don't worry, we have a study looking at half of an avocado at a time in a second, but we got to keep going and really just think about the basic implications of this. And what hit me hard for this as well was knowing this pretty strong connection between lycopene intake and prostate cancer. Now, prostate cancer is in my family the most common male cancer that there is, and we can see, about a 30% lower risk of prostate cancer with high lycopene intake. Well, I wouldn't want to throw away, 4 times more lycopene than I need to because I'm super obsessed with dodging fat. But yeah, we can think about the implications for somebody who's spending a bunch of money eating as many greens and carrots and different vegetables as possible, trying to get carotenoids and other antioxidants. We'll talk about other antioxidants in a second. But just throwing that money on the ground. Like, we're talking about someone on a low-fat diet having to eat like 7, 8 carrots instead of 1, like roughly like that, to get the same amount of absorption as somebody that's like including some overt fat to some degree. But I guess I just couldn't help but think that there's probably people out there trying to slam down so many plant antioxidants. It's like their whole life and lifestyle, and they're living on that flat line. They're just living right there, and they're just losing such a benefit from eating just like a few more grams of fat. And I really understand a lot of people are trying to eat lower fat to try and reverse certain diseases, etc. But it's also like antioxidants fight disease so well, you would want to have this absorption. And in terms of dodging fat to prevent heart disease, this study is good insight with, quote, carotenoids play a role in preventing and impeding the progression of atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease through their antioxidant effects, of course, but the finding itself was 76% lower atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease risk for the highest fifth of skin carotenoid status, so you want to absorb it. All right, and now I have some interesting updates on my personal body composition with today's sponsor, Hume, and their BodyPod. For those of you that don't know, this is a body analyzer that's a step above a smart scale because it has 8 points of contact to get electromagnetic signals and measure your body composition. So we're talking about a ton of metrics, of course, body fat and lean mass, muscle mass, etc., but also skeletal mass, water percentage, limb by limb breakdowns. And despite being, of course, wildly less expensive than the medical grade scans that you're getting at the hospital, this is 98% as accurate, which is cool. If you remember, last time things were not looking good for me. I had not been playing as much sports, and I was on an upward trend in terms of body fat and slightly down in terms of muscle. But because of this, and this is really a testament to how this can change behavior, I have been making sure to get cardio in the gym a bit more, and we can see that my lean mass went up while my fat percentage actually went down at the same time, which is awesome. And now I've gone ahead and got an under-desk treadmill just to keep it going, and I will say there's also the app with its AI-powered insights and stuff like that, which can be helpful. And it's also health savings account / flexible savings account eligible, so you can get this covered by insurance. And so if you want to check out the BodyPod, you can click the link below or use the code MikeTheVegan at checkout, and that stacks with existing discounts to 50% off, and that is only available for the next 7 days. And another thing I was thinking about was like, no one eats more vegetables a lot of times than raw people. And I couldn't help but think, and we've all seen it before, like some of these raw people looking not so great. And a lot of it has to do with like people who are European moving like 30 or 40 degrees latitude south into the tropics and then refusing to wear sunscreen. Different story. And I have absolutely no interest in like fishing out particular people that I don't think look great. I'm not here to do that. But I will mention somebody that I do think looks great that is raw, and that's Fully Raw Christina, who does include some overt sources of fat, plant fat, and that brings me to an interesting study on raw vegans and their antioxidant status versus meat eaters. And yeah, this study found that the carotenoid status of these raw vegans was about 3 times higher than meat eaters, which is great. However, they were eating a whopping 40% of their calories from fat. We're talking about fermented cashew and sesame nut sauces, which are emulsions, which is super interesting. And we're gonna get into some new research now here. Finally, we're talking about potentially seeing a 40% increase in carotenoid absorption with emulsified fat. So like fat, water mixture, like mayonnaise is an emulsion. But then on the other hand, we do have people who are aiming for low fat that look great as well, like Robbie Barbaro, Mastering Diabetes. And he's found that keeping fat low really helps him manage his type 1 diabetes. And so, it's a different equation for different people. So yeah, I've been diving into this topic, wondering how much fat, of what types of things, every study that has to do with carotenoid absorption. And one finding that I think is pretty important and interesting is just the type of fat. And we can see that saturated fat is outperformed, does worse than monounsaturated fat from this study. They compared canola oil to soybean oil to butter, and butter did the worst. And this was another salad study. They were given salad and these fats, and we have some more insights here because we have different levels of fat as well. Sadly, they didn't have a 0 fat group, which I would have loved to see, but they at least had a 3 gram, an 8 gram, and a 20 gram amount for each of those 3 fats. And while 20 grams definitely did the best, there is a strong argument here that 3 is probably doing a bit better than we thought it would be doing. Like that previous study looked at 0 or 6, but the 3 and 8 gram amounts in this study were roughly the same. In fact, didn't really get better at 8 grams. Anyway, back to that study that found that emulsified fats are absorbed 40% more. They also reinforced the idea that saturated fat is worse. They found that saturated fat was not as good. This got me thinking, avocados in a sense sort of mimic a natural emulsion. Maybe avocado would be better than avocado oil. But we have this study, which is also a study looking at half of an avocado versus a whole avocado, which I think is an interesting question. But the same amount of fat in terms of whole avocado didn't seem to outperform avocado oil in its emulsified tendency. So my emulsification theory was wrong in that sense. The oil did slightly better. And yeah, that half of an avocado did essentially as well for whole avocado in terms of beta carotene and in terms of lycopene, but lutein, another one that's good for your eyes, there was a bit more of a gap. So then we can just move completely on to the question of, are other antioxidants also fat soluble? What is going on here? And at the risk of having just way too long of a video going through highly detailed studies like we just did, I can tell you that there's a mix for polyphenols, which are perhaps even more common as antioxidants than carotenoids. And we're talking about a few doing better with absorption in terms of fat, but some not caring at all. For example, curcumin from turmeric, as well as quercetin, which is in various plant foods like greens, etc., and resveratrol in grapes all do a bit better with fat. But anthocyanins, which are the most common here, are ones that just don't care if they have more fat. But to summarize it, it appears that all carotenoids and quite a few polyphenols will be more absorbed with fat. And then I'll just say, beyond antioxidants, there's so much sort of pro and con territory when it comes to eating low fat versus not really caring about it as much. I personally land in like a low saturated fat, whole food fat emphasis, as opposed to trying to hit a certain macronutrient target. My LDL is low, I don't have a chronic disease, but again, there are studies from people like Barnard, etc. We're getting good results by putting people on that low fat type of vegan diet. Like, I don't know. So I'm really just trying to share information here. And of course, we have just general body mass as a driver for disease or frailty, really either way. Having too high a body mass leading to various diseases and being too low leading to lower survival of chronic diseases with frailty. And that might be where it's more of just a personal choice of like practical eating habits. Where does that land you? Is there somebody who like the moment they try to not eat a lower fat vegan diet end up like heading toward obesity? I don't know. But all these studies sort of made me kind of think about the little biohacking that you could do, or really just hacking the numbers. We have these people that might be trying to eat low fat for whatever reason. They're going to do that. Could it be that they take a little bit of like emulsified oil or mayonnaise and add that to a salad, just like 3 grams, and that could make all of the difference? And maybe it can also be achieved with like a cashew based or some other type of salad dressing that's just blended whole foods. And as somebody rightfully asked me, avocados are expensive, do you have to eat avocados? And all of the logic would say that there are various nuts that would do exactly the same thing. There's a bit more of like a fiber intact aspect there, and I really am annoyed that there's a lack of studies on that. We have one on like pistachios, but it's comparing a low fat diet of 25% fat to just like various levels of pistachio, and it did increase carotenoid levels, but pistachios have carotenoids as well, so like that study is basically meaningless for my purposes. And I'm really surprised the walnut board hasn't hopped on this. They put a bunch of money into studying walnuts all the time, whether it's artery function, etc. You think they would have done a study on this. But everything we know says, yeah, nuts are a fat source. They should get the job done too. So yeah, in the end, I would of course love to see more data on this. That's the easy thing to say. But yeah, if I were to design a study on this, I would randomize people at maybe 10, 15, and 20% fat and eating the same amount of carotenoids and see what their blood levels are at the end of, who knows, a couple weeks. Anybody got the money? Anyway, I still do stand by just seeing that salad with a flat line going, yeah, you have to be including some fat to really be getting your money's worth in terms of carotenoids, really getting that disease-fighting power of carotenoids. And the question is, would even just eating a larger variety of like whole grains and legumes and something with just like slightly more fat do it? Also another interesting question, something with more fat than straight salad, but still not an overt fat like oil or avocado. Anyway, I hope I didn't ruffle any feathers with this. This is really just information that I'm like, hey, everybody should see this because it's fascinating. And you can let me know down below what you think anyway, because everybody will. And I am curious to see like, hey, are there any studies that I missed, etc. And once again, if you would like to try Hume's BodyPod, you can click that link below and stack my discount for up to 50% off over the next 7 days. And I'm curious to see what else I can accomplish using this because, you know, we're on the right track. And I'm of course gonna keep using this and I'm never gonna stop until I'm shredded. Of course, feel free to like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.